So I want to circle back to Ellen Bernay's work on memory
Yeah.
reconsolidation, as
Oh man.
that was probably the section that just sounded like science fiction.
Yeah. It sounds
And
absolutely made up.
in today's episode, we're discussing a new documentary, Love Hurts, The Science of Heartbreak, that's just been released in association with the CBC's The Nature of Things. In this documentary, host Anthony Morgan speaks to some of the world's leading experts and researchers in the fields of neuroscience, neurology, psychiatry, and evolutionary biology. The documentary takes its viewers on a discovery to understand what happens to the human body and mind when experiencing the sorrow and pain of a broken heart. We are so fortunate to have the host of the documentary joining us today. Anthony Morgan is an award-winning science communicator, television host, game designer, and PhD researcher. He spent the last 20 years showing people the power science has to transform human lives for the better. Anthony, welcome, and thank you so much for joining me today to discuss the science of heartbreak.
Thanks so much. Happy to be
Yes,
here. Excited.
I'm so excited and happy to be talking to you about a topic that I am absolutely most passionate about and what I've dedicated my life's work to. So we'll start off by asking you, when you first set out to host this documentary on heartbreak, was there anything that you were motivated to explore around the topic, anything that you were really curious about or hoping to learn?
Yes, I would say that the thing I was most excited about and interested in was related to one of my favorite movies of all time, which is Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. I love that movie. It's a great movie. They don't pay me to say this. I just think it's a great movie. And for those who don't know, Jim Carrey, Kate Winslet, they're in a relationship. They break up. It's a hard time, and so they go through this process to literally erase the memories of each other because they'd rather do that than experience the pain of the heartbreak. And it turns out that this film is based on real science. There is a real pill, like there's an actual pill, it's called propranolol, that you can take that will let you erase not a whole memory, but at least part of the memory, the pain associated with it. And to find that out was absolutely fascinating to me.
So that's fascinating that already going into the documentary, you've had that natural curiosity based on that movie that I don't even know when that came out, like 20 years
Yeah,
ago or
yeah,
so.
yeah, I think so. God, I'm old.
Throughout the journey of creating this documentary, what were some of the most surprising or unexpected findings that you encountered regarding the science behind heartbreak?
I think I was probably most surprised that not only is it possible to sort of erase the emotional content of a memory, not only is that possible, but there are clinics that exist where you can literally go to do this, that it's actually somewhat common as a practice, or at least much more common than I realized. And so I got the chance to meet somebody who actually did this, who erased one of his own bad memories. I could never have imagined in a million years what that would be like, let alone getting to talk to somebody who went through it. So that was phenomenal. But I mean, that's just one example. There are tons. Like I found out that there's something called Takotsubo syndrome.
What are some of the symptoms of broken heart syndrome?
These are the same symptoms as a classical heart attack. So the heart is in kind of shock.
So for people who don't know, Takotsubo syndrome, that's the Japanese name for it. The English name is, it's better known as broken heart syndrome. And so when people experience a really significant loss, a very severe heartbreak, typically within 1 to 2 days of that experience, they'll start having the same kinds of symptoms you would have if you were having a heart attack. So they'll have, radiating pain going up from their chest up to their necks and numbness in the arm. And this condition can actually be life-threatening. People have actually died from broken heart syndrome. And it tends to be predominantly, and yeah, women roughly over the age of 50, postmenopausal, although not exclusively. So it blew me away to learn that a broken heart, the pain of a broken heart is not just a metaphor we use. It's physical, it's literal, it's real.
We have put people in the brain scanner. We know the brain pathways of romantic love.
Am I looking at love?
You're looking at love here.
It's an addiction, whether you're madly and happily in love or heartbroken.
I watched the documentary 3 times and I took extensive notes, and I cannot wait for people to listen to it, especially people going through heartbreak because it is so validating.
Yes, yes, that's actually exactly what one of our research
Yes.
participants said. We met a woman in the doc. Her name is Fabienne, and man, she went through it. It was. I was so grateful to get to talk to her because she just like spilled her heart out with us. She was dating somebody. She was in her late 30s, dating somebody. It was very serious. They were dating for like years. She was looking to start a family with this person, and he's giving her all these signs that he's taking the relationship seriously, that they want the same things. And she finds out deep into this relationship from the guy's own mother. Listen, she said, I love you like a daughter. I have to let you know my son has been seeing another woman for 9 months.
Yes.
9 months. And and so you're shattered when something like that happens. And one of the things she said she was grateful for in participating in the doc and getting to, go into the brain scanners and see what's actually happening in her brain in real time as she goes through this experience is to see that she's not crazy. Because you can feel like you're going nuts when you go through a heartbreak. It feels like real pain, and we know it because we can see it on the brain scanner. The pain regions of the brain light up. They actually light up when you're going through a
Yes.
heartbreak. So she said it was validating to know that it's not just in her head, that this is a real pain that, yeah, you're not alone with.
Her story was so remarkable in that she got to work with Helen Fisher, who is one of my idols,
Yeah.
and that she, like, even her as a psychologist,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
that even she was struggling. Like, she said that a lot of the common advice that she would give to other people, she was having trouble taking
Yep.
herself. And in her case, just the experience of seeing her, like a visual representation of her heartbreak,
Yeah.
validated her. I mean, she said, this
Yeah.
is a milestone for me. Turning the corner and not feeling like a victim in this situation was so validating.
That's it.
Yes.
That's it. And I think that's really the process of overcoming, at least part of the process of overcoming a heartbreak, is you regain a sense of control over your life because it's extraordinarily not just painful but disorienting when you experience a severe loss, especially if you don't see it coming, right? Like if there aren't signs,
Yes.
if it's out of the blue, the way that it was for a lot of our contributors, it's really difficult. And
Yes.
so it was
It's so
amazing to watch her turn a new leaf.
Yes, it's so true that there are so many different types of breakups, but the ones that really seem to come out of nowhere when we're blindsided and there didn't seem to be signs can be some of the hardest to recover from.
Hmm. Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, because it shakes our sense that we understood it. Not only is the relationship ending, like that's bad enough, but on top of that, you have trouble trusting even your own sense of perception, like your own ability to understand the world. How could I have missed this? Like, it's very easy to beat up
Exactly.
on yourself and to start questioning everything about the way that you see the world. Um, and it's really valuable to know that it's not your fault, that sometimes these things happen, and it's not because you did anything wrong. And then just trying to do the things that Fabienne and all of our contributors in the doc share about what you can do to kind of overcome these. But I'm probably jumping the gun a little bit.
Well, actually, that perfectly leads into my next question. And I know, like, this documentary it's an hour long, but of course, it left me wanting to know more.
Mhm.
What do you now believe are some of the most effective strategies for overcoming heartbreak?
What I've learned um, is that I want to be careful about saying time heals all wounds because
Mhm.
um, it's not exactly that time is doing the work. It's that our bodies, our physiology, our biology is designed to gradually um, start to adapt to the change that we've experienced and to remake sense of the world for ourselves. Um, and so that's your biology. Your body just does that on your behalf. That process, unfortunately, does take some time, but I can promise there's a light at the end of the tunnel, that your body will begin to adapt and get better over time. That's one thing I would say, is patience. And I know how easy it is to say patience when you're in the middle of a heartbreak because it's still really tough. Fabienne, one of the psychologists and the woman who had her heart broken, spoke a fair bit about reconnecting with other people who bring joy and support into your life, right? to reconnect. Essentially, what you're really doing is rebuilding your identity.
Yes.
You're rebuilding it anew. So you're the phoenix that rises from the ashes, you know.
Yes.
And it's not easy, and there'll be ups and downs, but I would say to be patient with yourself, in particular on the days when you don't feel like yourself, you don't feel like the you that you remember. Just remember to treat yourself the way that you would treat a really good friend who was going through the same thing.
Exactly. I mean, I know from my own experience with heartbreak, it just felt like the world just slowed down. And
Hmm.
it was one of the times in my life where I felt the closest to myself. Like, and it was hard, but it was also a transformative process. And so
Hmm.
now having done this work so now it's been 10 years, having worked with hundreds of people, I I've developed a bit of a roadmap that I call the better breakups method, because a lot of the common advice that we hear tends to fall into four categories of there's a whole lot of work around self-care, and there's the tremendous amount to that. Then there's all of the grief work of working through the emotions and processing everything you're feeling. And then there's the rebuilding component of
Hmm.
yourself outside of this relationship. And then the
Hmm.
last pillar is joy and pleasure. And you need something to help to anchor you, because a lot of the other pillars are actually a lot of work.
Yeah, yes.
Nurturing your heartbreak starts to feel like a part-time job.
One of the bittersweet but amazing parts about breakups is that you often learn things about yourself that you did not know. And one thing you usually learn is that you're a lot more resilient than you realized,
Yes.
that you can make it through things you didn't know you could get through.
So I want to circle back to Ellen Bernay's work on memory
Yeah.
reconsolidation, as
Oh man.
I mean, that was probably the section that just sounded like science fiction.
Yeah. It sounds
And
absolutely made up.
You essentially created something like a forgetting pill?
But Anthony, we're not erasing memories.
We're taking a traumatic memory and making it a bad memory.
so my question for you is, imagine someone's going through heartbreak and they see this section of the documentary. Who do you think you would recommend this sort of treatment for? Who is it for, and who is
Mm. Oh, this is a very tough question, and it's one that I specifically asked to Alain because, um, a heartbreak is not an easy thing to go through, but it might be an important thing to go through. Often it's the thing that can transform our lives and shape us in the best and the worst of ways. So there's something called post-traumatic stress disorder, which a lot of people are familiar with, the kinds of recurring memories and anxieties, intrusive thoughts. But there's also something called post-traumatic growth. And that is under the right conditions, when we go through hard things, it can actually make us a better version of ourselves. And so knowing about that, I had to ask, well, is it a good idea to take this medication? Do we really want to just skip over all of the potential learning that comes? It's painful learning, but the useful learning that comes with heartbreak. That's at least the way that I thought about it. And so I asked Alain, like, who should be, like, is it a good idea to be using this? And he said that, first of all, we're not erasing bad memories. We're turning traumatic memories into bad memories.
Mhm.
And he described it as a process of going from, imagine you have a breakup and you're, 15 years old, or you have a heartbreak at 15 years old. 30 years later, when you're 45, you're not going to feel the same way about it that you felt at 15. You'll still remember it, but the emotional content of that memory is going to be
Yeah.
dramatically different. And he argues that that is all that this pill is doing, is it's accelerating the timeline from heartbreak to the point that we can look at it without the pain. I asked
Yes.
him if he thought, let's say I walk into your clinic tomorrow and I had my heart broken yesterday. Would you recommend taking this pill? Would you let me take it? And he said, probably not. I don't think I would, because it's just not enough time to figure out how to cope with it on your own.
Yes.
And I asked him, well, is there a timeline you would say that, you would be a cutoff? And he wasn't really sure. He, mentioned 6 months or maybe a little longer than that. I think the times that he would probably be most likely to recommend this are in those cases where people kind of get stuck, because we'll all experience heartbreak at some point. There's no escaping it. But there are some heartbreaks that some people just seem to become stuck chronically in that experience. So one of our contributors, JP, the guy who erased his own heartbreak, he was a person like that. 3 years after his breakup, it was still as though it was fresh.
Yes.
And so maybe in those cases, if you've been going through this for a year, 2 years, 3 years, and it still feels very fresh, then maybe it might be useful. But I feel like it's kind of up to each person to decide. I'm really not sure.
I know. I wish, it just made me want to know more, but I wish there was an assessment tool. Like I can imagine that there would be some people when, yes, they're in the worst of it, in that deep withdrawal. And that first, I would say that first 4 to 6 weeks is really, really tough. That
Yeah.
perhaps you would, during that time, consider taking this pill, because you would do anything
Exactly.
to get rid of this pain. And yet, if you stick through it, you can get to the other side. But there are a subsect of people for whom they've tried therapy, they've tried coaching, they've read the books, they meditate. Like, so I can think of about 5 to 10% of people who I've worked with that I would perhaps
consider it.
Yes.
No, I don't want to make recommendations for other people, but I would say that personally, I would be very hesitant to use this, because I would be worried about the potential growth that I'm missing out on. Like,
Yes.
it's the bittersweet stuff of life, right? Like it's part of, I feel like it's a part of the journey.
Yes. Well, exactly. And that was one of my questions. Would you, like, knowing what you know now about heartbreaks that you've been through, would you consider taking this pill?
Yeah, no, I strongly lean towards no. I've had my share of heartbreak, but I feel like I've been very lucky. And so maybe it's just that I haven't had anything serious enough or severe enough happen to me that makes me think this is a good idea for me. But at this point, I lean towards no. And I don't seem to be alone in that, because as you saw in the doc, we play this live game. I call them freestyle socials, and they're meant to be like a vehicle, a live experimental game to kind of explore the intersection between what science says is possible and what society thinks is a good idea. And so at the end of this game, we ask these two-sided questions. We make people pick a side, and then we just let people kind of share the reasons for being on one side or another. And at the end of the game, towards the end of the night, I asked, knowing what you know now about heartbreak and the possibilities around it, would you rather be guaranteed to be alone for the rest of your life, or have a relationship that is guaranteed to end in heartbreak? And most people chose heartbreak, and it was honestly very moving. It felt for me like a very tender moment in the room, and I felt like there was that energy in the room that we were all kind of collectively acknowledging that we're choosing suffering because it has meaning.
Oh, I love that. Yes.
And it was really beautiful, So I tend to lean in that direction.
Yes. And I think that was a beautiful balance, because it was a fascinating section. And yet, despite it, there's a part of us that would want to indulge in this. And maybe that's part of why we love
100%.
this movie, because it's a fantasy that we can indulge in. But then in our real lives, there's a part of us that knows perhaps we need to go through this. Because I can only think of one heartbreak, my hardest heartbreak that I had in my mid-20s, and it took me years to recover. And in part, it was because there was a romantic betrayal. But also, the second time I went through heartbreak, I thought, I am not doing that again. I'm not going to spend years doing this. So that's what led me down this path. Okay, so thank you. I'm really glad we addressed that.
Happy to.
Okay, so now to lighten things up a little. So, I imagine there was so much more behind the scenes. And so I'd love to know if there were any memorable anecdotes or moments from the interviews that we didn't get to see.
Yeah. So getting to talk to Yelena and Christian, the power couple that studies sort of Takotsubo syndrome, right? Like the heartbreak broken heart syndrome. And apparently they met while they were researching broken heart syndrome. And then they fell in love, got married. I met their 3 kids. Their kids were adorable. And so like I can't think of a better example or better proof that out of heartbreak can grow love.
So the next question I wanted to ask you actually draws on something that what I read in your bio. And so I wanted to ask you, having spent 20 years in multiple fields showing people the power that science has to transform lives for the better, in what ways do you think that understanding the science of heartbreak can transform human lives and love for the better?
I would say that the one that comes to mind first is that knowing that my biology is designed to help me overcome a heartbreak, maybe more slowly than I'd like, maybe a lot more gradually than I'm comfortable with, but it is designed to help me get over it. Just knowing that means that I can be so much less anxious as I'm going through it, because I no longer need to put on top of the heartbreak I'm going through an anxiety on myself that there's something wrong with me, that I'm not through it yet. Right. So I don't have to compound the suffering that I go through by saying there's something wrong with me because I'm not better yet. It's okay. Your body's taking care of it. Give it time. And the other thing I think that it lets us know is it gives us the courage to love again if we've had our heart broken. I think that is when we're most likely to find the most meaningful, the most profound, the most beautiful kinds of love, is when we're not loving naively, when we know how bad it can hurt and we still choose to love again.
Yes, absolutely. There's that resilience, the fact that we're wired for love, but we're also wired to overcome and deal with heartbreak.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're each of us much stronger than we think we are. And I'm not guessing about that. I know that from the data.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. So as we start wrapping up, I wanted to ask you, what are you really hoping that the viewers are going to take away from watching this documentary?
I really hope that your viewers get to enjoy the journey that the doc takes them on in the same way that I got to. I really felt exceptionally lucky to get to learn all about the realities of heartbreak, that it is not in our heads. It does physically hurt. There are literal nerves going from our brains to our hearts that cause us pain, that the heartbreak is real, and so that we feel validated in that pain, but also to know that we can get over it with the support of our friends, with our families, with new experiences. It's something we can overcome and something that we can become stronger because of. And yeah, and just to really appreciate the love that you have, because nothing gold can stay. Be grateful for it while you have it, and be grateful for it even when you lose it.
Okay. I hope that will motivate many, because many people, it's been my experience that when I talk about heartbreak, people are fascinated and also worry that it's morbid and it's really negative. And yet it is just naturally a part of life. And if we can embrace it, it does actually open our hearts up to be able to love more openly.
Yeah, it really does. It makes it that when knowing that something is going to come to end it reminds us to be grateful for it all the more while we have it.
Yes. And before I ask you the last question, I wanted to ask you the list of absurd questions. Let's both answer them. I mean, at least it could be a one-word answer. If there's anything you want to add, please do. We'll start easy. Have you experienced heartbreak before?
That's a big yes. That's a big yes. Yeah. I had a
Same.
couple. Yeah.
Would you rather have a mild heart attack or a serious heartbreak?
Going through a heartbreak, it's not fun. It sucks a lot. But I think that I would pick the heartbreak because with the right circumstances, and I know the circumstances I want to aim for, I think I can become a wiser, more compassionate person. I think I can become a better person. How about you?
I'll be honest, I was Googling mild heart attack. Okay, how long would it take me to recover from it? I was comparing and contrasting because yeah, it wasn't a serious, I would not take a serious heart attack. Mild one, I considered it, but I would take the serious heartbreak knowing what I know now,
Yeah,
because now I feel like I have the tools.
yeah, exactly.
In
Exactly.
my 20s, I might have taken the mild heart attack.
I probably would have been, yeah, I probably would have done that because I'd be like, I got time now. I can work out again. I can get back up to capacity. So,
So next one, number 3, and we've already touched on it, but if I gave you the option to take a pill to erase the bad memory of a heartbreak, would you take it?
I'm still gonna lean towards no, because okay, so I'll tell you why. There's a specific experience that I had that made me think like, well, heck no. I asked this question at one of our games, or a version of it actually, where there's this thing called deep brain stimulation. You kind of implant electrodes in your brain, and it can do something similar to this drug. It can like ease, it can take the edge off of some of your stronger negative emotions. Um, and so I asked, imagine that you've lost somebody prematurely. They've died young, somebody close to you. And you can do this thing to like take away the sting of that pain. Would you want to? And everybody went to the no side. And this one woman came up to the microphone, and I didn't know this when I'd asked the question, but she had recently lost somebody. Her younger brother died in his like early 20s. And she said, hell no. And I asked her why, and she said that the pain let her know how much she loved her brother. And yeah, and it still gets me a little bit choked up because it's such a beautiful idea. Um, that life is not just the good stuff, it's the bad stuff, and I want it all.
Yes. It's like that quote I love, grief is the price we pay for love.
Yes, yes.
And the last one I have is, would you rather be alone for the rest of your life or fall in love in a relationship that is guaranteed to end in heartbreak?
Yeah. Well, I'll say the heartbreak because one of the answers they showed in the doc was hilarious. Um, he said, "Well, yeah, I'll pick the heartbreak because at least then I can write all those Taylor Swift songs." And and I'm like, like love song, like yeah, there's a market to share that kind of art with people, the pain of a heartbreak. So I think I would go for a heartbreak. It's better to have loved than lost.
Yes.
You know,
Because then you can connect with all of that art, movies,
100%.
poetry, and because then you're
Yeah.
like, oh yes, I've been there.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. You one of the most meaningful experiences we have in life is connecting, and that can be over good stuff and bad stuff. And I find especially the bad stuff. Like there's a reason that Someone Like You by Adele resonated so deeply.
Yes.
Because everyone's like, oh my
Mhm.
God, I know that wail. I know that pain.
Oh.
I'm not alone. Very cool. So one of the questions we asked in the game was, which one is the more epic breakup song or heartbreak song? Um, Someone Like You by Adele, or I Will Always Love You by Whitney Houston.
Mm. Oh,
Which one
probably
do you
I will
pick?
always love you.
Yeah, Whitney Houston was great. It was one of the just the volume of air moving out of that voice box. It was just it's incredible. And
Because
yeah, it was.
it also encapsulates also like the pain and the beauty of love.
Mhm.
Whereas Adele's song was a bit more like in the depths of sadness.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Like I will always love you. It's almost like what remains even after you've gone through the worst of the heartbreak.
yes.
All right. Are you ready for my last question?
I think I am.
All right. So, Anthony, you mentioned several times throughout the documentary that you, in hosting this documentary, that you were on a mission to understand what happens to us when we go through heartbreak, what happens to our hearts, our minds, our bodies, our souls, to us socially. Do you feel like you've accomplished that mission?
I do. I feel like I have the best understanding that I've ever had of it. I mean, a topic as complex and rich as something like love and heartbreak, I don't know if any of us will ever fully understand. Um, but I feel like I am really grateful to have learned what I learned and to be able to understand it much more profoundly than I did in a way that I can share with others now. And we can kind of start to trace the outlines of what this thing is we call love and heartbreak.
Mission accomplished. All right. Well, your passion for this project has been infectious, and I hope that all of our listeners will be intrigued enough to check out the documentary, which is streaming for free on CBC Gem. All that's needed is a free sign-in.